Welcome back to MVM. Today we are going to be taking a look, or a closer look anyway, at Divinus from Lucky Duck. This is their tile placement legacy game, which is kind of an interesting combination, much like My City. For 2 to 4 players, and we have been fortunate enough to actually play the first scenario. We haven't played the second scenario, but we've looked into it enough to at least tell you a little bit more about the game.
Yeah, and we did an unboxing of this when it first came in because we wanted to show you guys a sneak peek at what it looked like. This is, of course, a sponsored preview. I think it needs to be said that we've really enjoyed our first play.
Yeah, we did enjoy it. We'll try not to let that bias us too much, but what we've seen so far was really interesting, and I'm interested to play all the way through the campaign, which I think, just to give you a little information, is 12 scenarios.
I believe 12, and that's a good point. So we're only really going to talk about the first scenario and kind of what the game is like at the start, because we don't want to spoil it for you. Half the fun of legacy games is uncovering those new rules, those new gameplay mechanics over time, and we definitely don't want to take that away from anyone.
Yeah, and this game does a really good job in that first scenario of at least planting the seeds
for sure.
of that legacy. Now, with that said, let's tell you kind of how the game plays, but first let's take a look at what we have here. What you're going to see on the main section here is the main board. Now, this isn't where the game is going to take place as much as it is in front of you, because you're building sort of a landmass in front of you, but this is where you're going to be drafting these tiles. We've got these terrain tiles set up coming from these 2 different stacks, which are distinctly different stacks of tiles, which have different types of symbols on them. But again, these are all going to be evolving from scenario to scenario. Across the top here, we have some quest cards. These are going to come out, at least these 3 came out in the first scenario. I'm sure there may be more in the second and beyond.
I guarantee it, for sure.
These are basically going to be some goals that you want to achieve throughout, and it's these ones in particular are first come, first serve as you're playing the game. Then the first scenario also has some God cards, which you're going to find in the upper corners. These are effectively the long-term goals for the scenario, so the end of game goals, if you will.
And these gods and quests are all kind of set up by the narrative in the app. So this is an app-driven game. The app is going to talk you through the story. It's going to talk you through the setup. But the crux of it is you've got these 2 different types of gods, your Greek mythology and your Norse mythology, and they're all competing for you. You are playing a character, and you're doing so by just picking one of these boxes that has a picture on it, and you're going to name it. We named our characters Ryan and David, so we were so clever.
I didn't write it on the box, but these are our demigods. And inside the box at the beginning of the game, as Ryan will show you,
it's just dice at the beginning.
These dice.
You have your own colored dice, but there's a lot that happens with these boxes. You can earn titles that come on these boxes. You can earn powers that come in this box, and you can earn favor with either the Greek or the Norse pantheon. And the book has said that there will be other things that come and hide away in our box over the course of the game as well. So what all those things are, I don't know, but it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, we can't spoil too much, mostly because we don't know too much. But we do know enough to tell you exactly how the first scenario plays and how the game structure is. Because the game structure, again, just in the first scenario, is very straightforward. On your turn, you're effectively going to be doing one of 2 things. You're going to be taking your big chunky dice, rolling them up at the beginning of the game, and then at different times throughout. But once you have your dice, you're going to be using these to actually draft these tiles that are available. So for instance, I could use this 4 and 3 to take this 7 tile. Now the interesting thing here is, you're not just having to add the numbers. You can actually do addition and subtraction with these dice to get exactly where you need to get. Now, you might be thinking, well, are the lower tiles as valuable? Well, I'll tell you right now, in scenario 1, probably not.
Yeah.
But they do help you achieve the God cards.
And that's the thing that you're looking at here is the difference between the quest cards and the God cards. Quest cards want you to have a specific type of symbol, and you'll see the symbols represented out on these higher cards. The lower cards, at least at the start of the game, don't have any symbols on them at all. But what's very cool is as you complete these quests, as you make decisions during the game, the app is going to prompt you, perhaps, to add stickers to some of these tiles based on decisions you've made. Those tiles are going to stay in front of you, so they're not going to affect the way that the first game plays out. But then in the second game and beyond, you're going to start seeing these icons spread out. So these lower tiles will become more valuable as the game progresses.
Yeah, and what we can tell you is these lower tiles also have something depicted on them that we haven't even been told what that is yet, but I do happen to know that it is introduced in the second scenario.
Right.
So immediately with the second scenario, those tiles are going to play a little bit more of a role. And like what Ryan said, one of the coolest things about how you interact with the app is when you do a certain thing, for instance, these quests, you're not only going to read some flavor text, but you're often going to be given a decision to make. For instance, you might decide to build some sort of structure or potentially preserve the forest and not build that structure. Depending on what you do, you're going to place a sticker on a tile in your area. And that sticker, like Ryan said, is not going to do much, if anything, this scenario. But in the next scenario, as tiles come out, there are rules, and of course there are stickers for the rule book, that will introduce rules where you're going to use the app to scan some of these stickers. And they actually have a cool new mechanism where it doesn't require even QR codes. You're just scanning these stickers themselves, and you can interact with that location. So if I chose to build the structure, it's that structure. If I didn't choose to build the structure, it's still going to be that preserved forest and potentially throughout the entire campaign.
Yeah, and not only that, the narrative kind of rewards players for making certain decisions because it comes back to that core push and pull between the two types of gods. The Greeks will want one way and the Norse will want another, and you can track that on the side of your box. You're going to gain favor with those different gods, and you're going to gain favor as well for completing their specific objectives. For the first scenario that we played, the Norse gods wanted you to have giant land masses of one type or another, whereas the Greeks wanted you to have several smaller land masses. And so when you're placing these tiles out in front of you in this grid, you're trying to build those land masses in one of two ways. You're either trying to build a lot of small ones or one giant one of a certain type.
Or maybe a little of both.
Or maybe a little both, because you can score on these differently. You can score a little bit on one card and a little bit on the other card, but based on how you score, the app is going to tell you what gifts these gods give you, which I think is super interesting. You might get better dice upgrades, you might get different stickers that come on the board, or you might just get more favor. And what favor ultimately does in the campaign, we don't know, but it seems pretty good to have.
Yeah, you generally want favor, because I do know also in future scenarios there are going to be things that happen, some of those stickers that come back out into play. And if you happen to be the person who leads in favor with a particular side, you may be blessed with a new reward. And speaking of rewards, one of the things, and I'm going to spoil this right now, so if you don't want to know, turn your ears off for a second, but at the end of the first scenario, I was able to get this 12 sticker. And you might be asking, well, what's the significance of a 12?
Oh, that's great.
All these dice are 1 to 6. They're 6-sided dice. And as you can tell, when you're trying to get these higher numbers, to get a 12, you might have to use, well, you're going to at least use 2 dice, but most likely 3 or 4 dice to get it. But now I have one of my die that if I roll it, it might come up a 12, and now I have a single die that I'm going to be able to use to get some of those higher value tiles.
Yeah, so why does that matter? Well, we've talked about what it's like to take tiles. We've talked about why you take tiles. The positioning them in your grid is super important. You're making this 4x4 grid. But the other half of the game is equally important, and that is when you're going to pull your dice back.
Yeah.
So if David can take that 12 with 1 die, he is doing it more efficiently. I've wasted 3 dice. I only have 3 left. I might use these to take one other tile, and then I'm going to have to pull back my dice. And that's kind of like a pass action. It's refreshing. You're taking all of your dice back, and then you're replenishing the empty spots. So David's spot is going to stay full here until he can replenish. So if you can take a lot of spaces with 1 die apiece, you're looking pretty good.
Yeah, and that's the general cycle of the game. You're either going to be taking a tile using dice, or what they call resting, which is, like Ryan said, taking your dice back, rolling them back up, but you're effectively burning your turn, if you will.
You are, and you don't want to do that too often, but you might have to. For example, if you're really going after the high numbers and you're using 3 or 4 dice per placement, you're only getting maybe 2 placements between refreshes, where if you go to the smaller ones, you're getting 4 or 5 before you have to rest.
Yeah, and remember, this is a drafting game, if you will. So when you're looking out there, and if you're playing at the table of 3 to 4 people, you're going to want to look around to see what everyone else is up to. Because if you thought you were going to have the biggest water space, and you look over and someone's way ahead of you, you might not want to do that anymore, or you might want to compete with them by taking these water spaces that work for you. One thing we didn't talk about too much, but it is important to know, when you place these tiles in this 4x4 grid, all sides have to match.
Yeah.
So things start to get a little trickier in a very puzzly sort of way, because at first you're like, okay, click, 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 you got your tiles down. But then when you've got 3 maybe spaces left, or 2, you need one type of tile
Right.
specifically that has this on one side, this on another side. And there are 3 different types of land. There's water, there's the plains, and then there's the mountains. So it does get a little bit tricky. And the game, of course, is going to come to an end, or the scenario, when somebody, one player, builds their entire 4x4.
Yeah, now when you're taking these tiles, like David said, you always do have to match them, or you can choose to build over another tile. It's called overbuilding, and it can give you some flexibility. It can cover a space, maybe give you more options to build off of it, but what you're effectively doing is wasting a tile. You're not pushing yourself one step closer, because really, being the person that lays down their 12th tile, it doesn't mean that you're doing better or winning the game, but it does mean that you have more tiles, so your chances of completing one of these goals is much higher.
Now, there's one last thing I want to tell you about that wasn't in Scenario 1, but I do know that it's in Scenario 2, and it's a significant thing. We've told you about 2 things you could do on your turn, either take tiles or rest. In the second scenario, I do know that it introduces a 3rd thing that you can do, and there's going to be new things that come out onto the main board. I don't want to spoil what those are,
but they're cool.
It's a completely different and significant action that you can take where you're interacting with basically these 2 new locations to potentially get some of those upgrades and do things that affect your ongoing engine.
Yeah, and if you really want to see that, and you don't mind having a little bit of a spoiler, and you want to see how Scenario 2 works, we are going to have a live stream up on the channel as well, so you can actually see what we're teasing at right here. It's not going to be a huge spoiler, like we're just playing 1 scenario out of 12, we're just playing Scenario 2. But Lucky Duck has been pretty close-lipped as to what to expect from those later scenarios, and if the game keeps adding and changing like it did between Scenario 1 and 2, I think we're going to end up with some crazy things that we could do by the end of the game.
Yeah, it is really interesting. As we were sitting here talking, I thought to myself, with so many things that change, I'm not sure, you may spoil something for one scenario, but who knows whether that rule stays in place for future scenarios, because it could come and go. These locations could come, and once they're tapped out, they might be replaced with something else in the game.
Well, and some of the things that you see, if you do watch the live stream, you're going to see some decisions that we made in Scenario 1 reflected in Scenario 2. If you make different decisions in Scenario 1, your Scenario 2 is going to look different. You're going to have some symbols out here that maybe we don't have, or we'll have some symbols out that you don't, and it's all based on those decisions we made when completing these quests, or when the app asked us to make a specific decision.
Yeah, so Divinus, I believe, from what we know, is going to be a game that offers a lot of really robust evolution as you play it. Obviously, it is a legacy game, but this is one of those sort of lighter legacy games that I think is going to appeal to people who want to get a lot of people to the table who may not be gamers, because mechanically it's very easy to play.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people hear legacy game and they have a certain set of expectations that come with that. Well, there are definitely stickers. I mean, we have this whole envelope here. I'm not going to spoil the stickers for you, but there are a lot of stickers just for the first 2 scenarios. So you're going to be stickering a lot, but what I don't think you're going to be doing is destroying. So everything that you're using is going to be kept so that you can play a endless scenario basically once you're done.
Yeah.
All of the stickers on the dice can come off. They use a special technology that they've developed to make these stickers come off and on very easily. And they're also going to sell clean dice packs. So if you want to just play the game without interrupting your scenario, you can just play the actual everlasting game with regular dice and not impact your legacy at all, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, that is interesting. I am really looking forward to digging into that campaign first and foremost, but we'll see if I play that ever ongoing game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I've gone back and played my city since completing the campaign. There's another side of the board in my city where you can just play the game. And so they're offering something quite like this, or not quite like that, but very similar. In that when you're done with your 12, it's not like this game is just going to go and collect dust. You can still bring it out for game nights and play a really fun tile laying game when you're done.
Yeah. So that is today what we have to share about Divinus. If you have any questions at all, absolutely, please feel free to make them in the comments below. We'll answer what we can, although we won't want to spoil much.
Right. Don't ask us for spoilers.
No spoilers here. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.